The Throne of Stars was the most beautiful space station Park Dae-sung had ever seen. It floated in the darkness like a palace made of light and silver metal. The Valorians had built it 3,000 years ago, back when humans were still fighting with swords and riding horses. Now, it served as their place for meeting other species and making deals. Dae-sung stood at the viewing window of his small shuttle, watching the station grow larger. He was a plain-looking man in his mid-40s, with gray streaks in his black hair and calm eyes that revealed nothing. He wore a simple dark suit. No medals, no decorations. Behind him, his two aides checked their documents one final time. "Sir," one of them said, "the Valorians have sent their greeting. High Ambassador Thesara will meet us personally." "That's generous of them," Dae-sung replied. His voice was soft, almost gentle. The aide hesitated. "Sir, our intelligence says she has negotiated the surrender of 17 civilizations. She's never offered equal terms to anyone." Dae-sung smiled slightly. "Then today will be interesting." The shuttle docked smoothly. When the doors opened, Dae-sung stepped out into a hallway that seemed made of crystal and flowing water. Valorian guards lined both sides, tall beings with silver-blue skin and eyes like polished gems. They stood perfectly still, watching the humans with something between curiosity and amusement. At the end of the hallway, 3 figures waited. High Ambassador Thesara was exactly as the reports described. She was tall and elegant, with silver hair that flowed like liquid metal down her back. Her robes were white and gold, and she held herself with the confidence of someone who had never been refused anything in her long life. She looked at Dae-sung the way someone might look at a clever pet. Beside her stood a younger male Valorian in military armor. This was War Prince Kelvoran, her nephew. His expression was openly dismissive, his arms crossed over his chest. The third figure was old, ancient, even by Valorian standards. Elder Morath leaned on a staff, his eyes clouded but sharp. Unlike the others, he did not smile. He watched Dae-sung with something that might have been caution. "Welcome to the Throne of Stars," Thesara said. Her voice was musical but carried an edge of superiority. "We are pleased that humanity has finally reached far enough to find us." Dae-sung bowed respectfully. "The honor is ours, High Ambassador. Humanity is grateful for this opportunity." Kelvoran laughed softly. "Grateful indeed. Your species has been traveling the stars for what, 200 years? We had conquered our first dozen worlds before your ancestors discovered fire." The insult was obvious. Dae-sung's aides stiffened, but Dae-sung himself showed no reaction. "You are correct," he said calmly. "We are young. We have much to learn." This seemed to please Thesara. She gestured for them to follow. "Come, let us discuss what humanity hopes to gain from this meeting." They walked through corridors filled with ancient art and treasures taken from conquered worlds. Thesara pointed out several pieces proudly, gifts from species that had wisely submitted to Valorian rule. The message was clear: join us on our terms, or join the collection. The negotiation chamber was a vast circular room with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. Seats were arranged around a central table, with the Valorian delegation on one side and the humans on the other. The difference in numbers was obvious. 12 Valorians faced 3 humans. "Now then," Thesara said, settling into her chair like a queen on a throne, "what does humanity propose?" Dae-sung placed a single document on the table. Full and equal partnership, mutual defense, shared technology, equal voting rights in any joint council. Silence filled the room. Then Kelvoran burst out laughing. Several other Valorians joined him, their musical voices filling the chamber with mockery. Thesara raised a hand and the laughter faded. But she was smiling too, a patient, pitying smile. "Equal partnership," she repeated. "Young human, do you understand what you are asking?" The Valorian Dominion has existed for 15,000 years. We have brought order to this region of the galaxy. We have defeated empires that ruled 1,000 worlds. She leaned forward. What has humanity accomplished that would make you our equals? Dae Sung did not flinch. We have survived. Survived? Kelvoran scoffed. You have existed in a small corner of the galaxy, fighting among yourselves, barely reaching beyond your own solar system until recently. That is not survival. That is insignificance. And yet, Dae Sung said quietly, we are here. The room fell silent again. There was something in his voice. Not anger, not pride, just simple certainty. Thesara studied him with new interest. You speak as if that means something. It means everything. High Ambassador. Dae Sung folded his hands on the table. Every species we have encountered has asked the same question. How did humanity spread so far so fast? How did we defeat the Drenari Collective when they outnumbered us 50-1? How did we break the Vash hegemony in less than a year? How did we end the Tauran Empire when they had ruled for 6,000 years? He paused, letting the names hang in the air. Even Kelvoran had stopped smiling. The answer is simple, Dae Sung continued. Humanity has never lost a war we truly committed to. Not once. Not ever. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Thesara laughed. It was a genuine laugh, full of surprise and amusement. She shook her head, silver hair swaying like water. "Oh, young human," she said, "you are entertaining. I will give you that. But boasting about victories against minor powers does not impress us. The Valorian Dominion has crushed civilizations far greater than yours." The other Valorians joined her laughter. Kelvoran slapped the table with amusement. Even the guards by the door were smiling. But Elder Morath did not laugh. Dae Sung noticed. Their eyes met across the room, and for just a moment something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or warning. "You are welcome to stay," Thesara said, waving a hand dismissively. "We will consider your proposal, but I suggest you lower your expectations, human. Equal partnership is not something we grant to children." Dae Sung stood and bowed again. "We will wait, High Ambassador. Humanity is patient." As the human delegation left the chamber, Kelvoran turned to his aunt. "They are bold, I'll give them that." "Foolish, but bold." Thesara nodded. "Assign someone to keep them comfortable, but there is no need to rush these negotiations. Let them understand their place first." Only Morath remained troubled. When the others had left, he approached one of the record keepers. "I need access to the restricted archives," he said quietly. "Everything we have on human military history, especially the wars they mentioned, the Drenari, the Vash, the Tauran." The record keeper looked surprised. "Elder, those files are very old. Some are incomplete. Gather what we have." Morath's ancient eyes were distant, remembering fragments of warnings he had heard long ago from dying species. "I need to understand why those civilizations are no longer with us." Outside the station, the small human ship Endurance floated in the darkness. Captain Yun Hana stood on her bridge watching the massive Valorian station through the viewport. "Captain?" Lieutenant Bayek Jin Woo approached her. "The ambassador's shuttle is returning. He says the first meeting went as expected." Hana nodded slowly. "They laughed at him, didn't they?" Jin Woo checked the message again. "He doesn't say, but..." "Yes, probably." Hana smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew how this story always ended. "They always laugh at first," she said quietly. "They always stop, eventually." 3 days passed on the throne of stars. 3 days of waiting in comfortable rooms with beautiful views and excellent food. 3 days of being politely ignored. Thesara had assigned a young aide named Velaran to handle the humans. He was barely out of his training. and his job was simple: keep the humans happy and distracted while the real work of the Dominion continued elsewhere. It was an insult wrapped in hospitality, and everyone knew it. Park Dae-sung did not complain. He attended the cultural tours Valoran arranged. He admired the ancient artwork. He asked polite questions about Valorian history. He acted exactly like the harmless, insignificant human the Valorians expected him to be. But at night, when his aides asked him about the delays, he simply smiled. "Let them take their time," he said. "Patience is something humans understand very well." Meanwhile, deep in the restricted archives of the station, Elder Morath was reading files that had not been opened in centuries. The room was dark and dusty, filled with data crystals that glowed faintly in the shadows. Morath sat alone at a reading terminal, his old eyes moving slowly across words written by species long dead. The first file was from the Drenari Collective. The Drenari had been a proud people, warriors who believed in honor and direct combat. They had encountered humanity 80 years ago near the edge of human space. A border dispute had turned into a war, and the Drenari had been confident of victory. They outnumbered the humans 50-1. Their ships were faster, their weapons were stronger. The file contained a final transmission from the Drenari High Command. "They will not stop. We destroy their ships, and they build more. We kill their soldiers, and more come. We burned 3 of their worlds, and they responded by burning 30 of ours. We offered peace. They refused. They said they would accept nothing less than complete surrender. We laughed at them. We are not laughing anymore. To any species reading this, do not provoke the humans. Do not threaten what they love. Do not assume their kindness is weakness. We made that mistake. Now we are gone." Morath sat back in his chair, troubled. The Drenari Collective had ruled over 200 worlds. Now those worlds were either human territory or empty graves. The entire species had been wiped out in less than 5 years. He opened the next file. The Vash Hegemony. The Vash had been different. They were traitors and schemers, not warriors. They had tried to manipulate humanity through economics, controlling trade routes and resources. When that failed, they had funded pirate attacks on human colonies, always keeping their own hands clean. The humans had discovered the truth. The war lasted 11 months. The Vash ambassador's final recorded message was brief. "We thought we were clever. We thought we could control them from the shadows. But humans do not forget, and they do not forgive. They came for us with everything they had, not just their military. Their entire civilization turned toward our destruction. Their farmers grew food for the war effort. Their children collected metal for ships. Their old people worked in factories. Everyone, every single one of them. We surrendered, and still they came. They said surrender was not enough. They said we had to be made safe. The Vash hegemony exists no more. Learn from our mistake." Morath's hands were shaking slightly as he opened the final file. The Tauran Empire. The Tauran had been ancient and powerful, 6,000 years of expansion, conquest, and rule. They had dismissed humanity as insects when they first made contact. They had demanded tribute. When the humans refused, the Tauran had laughed and sent a fleet to teach them respect. That fleet never returned. The war that followed lasted 8 years. The Tauran had every advantage: numbers, technology, experience. But the humans kept coming. They lost battles and came back. They lost fleets and built new ones. They lost worlds and fought harder. The final entry in the file was not from the Tauran. It was from a neutral observer species called the Mithari. "We watched the human-Tauran war from beginning to end. We documented everything. The Tauran made one critical error. They assumed that human losses would eventually break human will. This assumption was wrong. Human will does not break. It bends, it bleeds, it suffers, but it does not break. The more the Tauren killed, the more determined the humans became. By the end, the humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to make sure the Tauren could never threaten anyone again. The Tauren Empire is gone. Not defeated, gone. The humans did not occupy their worlds. They did not take their resources. They simply ended them. We advise all species, do not threaten humanity. They are not conquerors. They do not want your territory or your wealth. But if you make them your enemy, they will not stop until you no longer exist. Morath closed the file and sat in silence for a long time. 3 species, 3 warnings, all saying the same thing, and the Dominion had just laughed in a human diplomat's face. Across the station, aboard the human vessel Endurance, Captain Yun Han-na was reviewing the day's reports with Lieutenant Bayek Jin-woo. The Endurance was small compared to the massive Valorian warships nearby, just a frigate, designed for speed and precision rather than raw power. Its crew of 80 worked quietly and efficiently, maintaining systems and running drills as they waited. 3 days, Jin-woo said, frustration in his voice. They're treating us like we don't matter. Ha-na looked up from her console. Does that bother you, Lieutenant? Doesn't it bother you, Captain? Ha-na leaned back in her chair, considering the question. She was young for a ship captain, barely 32, but her eyes held the steady calm of someone who had seen combat and survived. Let me tell you something, she said. When I was a child, my grandmother told me stories about Earth, about the old wars, before we reached the stars. She said that humans have always been underestimated. Our enemies always think we are too small, too weak, too divided. And every time, we prove them wrong. But why don't we just show them? Jin-woo asked. Show them what our fleet can do, make them respect us. Hana shook her head. That's not how respect works. If we threatened them, they would fear us. Maybe. But fear turns to hatred, and hatred turns to war. The ambassador understands this. We don't make threats. We don't show off. We simply wait, and when the moment comes, we act. And if the moment doesn't come? Hana smiled slightly. It always comes. That's the thing about the galaxy. It's full of danger. And when danger arrives, everyone learns very quickly who their real friends are. The door to the bridge opened, and Dae-sung walked in. He looked tired but calm, his hands clasped behind his back. Ambassador, Hana said, standing. Any progress? None, Dae-sung admitted. They're still deciding whether to take us seriously, but that's fine. We have time. Jin-woo couldn't hide his frustration. Sir, with respect, what are we waiting for? They're never going to see us as equals unless something changes. Dae-sung looked at the young lieutenant, and something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but understanding. You're right, he said quietly. Something will have to change, but we won't be the ones to force it. That's not our way. He turned to look out at the stars. The galaxy has a habit of providing opportunities. We just have to be ready when they arrive. At that moment, the ship's sensors lit up with a warning. Hana was at her console instantly. What is it? The tactical officer's voice was tense. Unknown contacts at the edge of sensor range. Multiple signatures. Captain, there are a lot of them. Hana looked at Dae-sung. His expression had not changed. It seems, he said calmly, that the opportunity has arrived. The alarms began screaming across the throne of stars within minutes. In the main command center of the station, Valorian officers rushed to their posts as screens filled with red warning symbols. High Ambassador Thesara arrived quickly, her silver robes flowing behind her as she demanded answers. Report, she commanded. The senior tactical officer looked pale. High Ambassador, a massive fleet has exited hyperspace at the edge of the system. Over 200 ships. They're broadcasting identification codes now. He paused, his voice dropping. It's the Hollow Swarm. The room went silent. The hollow swarm was a nightmare that every spacefaring civilization knew about. They were pirates, but calling them pirates was like calling a plague a minor illness. They traveled in massive fleets, appearing without warning and stripping entire systems bare. They had no homeworld, no government, no rules. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on. And now, they were here. "How is this possible?" Thessera demanded. "This station is in neutral space. Our defenses—" "The station has minimal defenses, High Ambassador," the tactical officer interrupted. "This is a diplomatic post. We have 12 escort ships. The swarm has over 200. Kelvaran pushed his way to the front, his face eager despite the danger. "Then we fight. Valorian warriors do not run from pirates." "With 12 ships against 200, another officer said. "That's not courage, that's suicide." Thessera raised a hand for silence. Her mind was racing, calculating options. They could not win this fight. The swarm would overwhelm them in hours. The only real question was whether they could negotiate, offer tribute, perhaps, in exchange for survival. It would be humiliating. The proud Valorian dominion, brought low by common raiders. But survival mattered more than pride. "Open a channel to the swarm," she ordered. "We will negotiate." "High Ambassador," a voice said from the doorway. "I would advise against that." Everyone turned. Park Dae-sung stood at the entrance to the command center, his 2 aides behind him. He looked calm, impossibly calm, as if a fleet of 200 enemy ships was merely an inconvenience. Thessera frowned. "This does not concern you, human. This is a Valorian matter." "With respect, High Ambassador, it concerns everyone on this station, including my delegation." Dae-sung walked forward, ignoring the hostile stares of the Valorian officers. "The Hollow Swarm does not negotiate. They have never honored a single agreement in their history. If you offer them tribute, they will take it and attack anyway. That is their nature." "And what would you suggest?" Kelvoran sneered. "That we fight with your tiny ship beside us? One human frigate will not turn this battle." Dae-sung met his eyes without flinching. "No, one frigate will not." "But we did not come here planning to run at the first sign of trouble. We came to be your allies." He turned to Thessera. "Let us prove it." Thessera studied him for a long moment. There was something in his face that she had not noticed before, a quiet certainty that seemed out of place in someone facing impossible odds. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. "Let Captain Yoon coordinate with your fleet. Human tactical doctrine is different from yours. We have faced odds like these before." Kelvoran laughed harshly. "You expect us to take orders from humans? From a species we met 3 days ago?" "Not orders," Dae-sung said. "Suggestions. Your captains can accept or reject them as they choose. But I think they will find our suggestions useful." Before Thessera could respond, another alarm sounded. "High Ambassador," the tactical officer called out. "The swarm is moving. They're approaching the station in attack formation. We have approximately 2 hours before they reach weapon range." 2 hours. 2 hours to decide the fate of everyone on the station. Thessera looked at the human diplomat. He stood there quietly, waiting, offering help that she had never asked for from a species she had dismissed as insignificant. Every instinct told her to refuse. The Valorian Dominion did not need help from children, but survival was more important than pride. "Very well," she said finally. "Your captain may coordinate with our fleet, but Kelvoran will retain overall command." Dae-sung bowed. "That is acceptable." He turned and left the command center, already speaking into his communicator. Thessera watched him go, wondering if she had just made a terrible mistake or a very wise decision. On the bridge of the Endurance, Captain Yoon Ha-na received Dae-sung's message and immediately began preparing. "Battle stations," she announced calmly. Lieutenant Bayek, I need full tactical analysis of the enemy fleet. Weapons, formations, command structure, everything. Jin Woo's fingers flew across his console. Already on it, Captain. The Hollow Swarm typically uses wave attacks. They send smaller ships first to wear down defenses, then bring in the heavy hitters. Their command ships stay at the back. Standard Predator tactics, Hana observed. They expect prey to run or surrender. They're not used to facing enemies who fight back hard. Captain, the communications officer reported, we're receiving a channel request from the Valorian flagship. War Prince Kelvoran wishes to speak with you. Hana nodded. Put him through. Kelvoran's face appeared on the main screen. He looked annoyed. A warrior forced to work with people he considered inferior. Human Captain, he said without greeting, I am told you have tactical suggestions. Speak quickly. I have a battle to plan. Hana did not react to his rudeness. War Prince, the Hollow Swarm expects you to form a defensive line around the station. That is the logical response when outnumbered. They will overwhelm your line with numbers and destroy you piece by piece. And what would you suggest instead? Attack. Kelvoran blinked. Attack? We have 12 ships against 200. You have 12 ships and 1 human frigate, Hana corrected. And humans do not defend. We attack. The swarm commanders are cowards. They stay at the back of their fleet because they expect easy victories. If we hit them hard and fast, aim for their command ships specifically, we can create chaos. Pirates fight for profit, not loyalty. If their leaders die, their fleet will lose coordination. Kelvoran was silent for a moment, processing her words. It went against everything he had been taught. A smaller force should defend, not attack. But there was something in the human captain's eyes that made him hesitate to dismiss her. You would risk your ship on this strategy? The Endurance will lead the attack, Hana said simply. We will show you how humans fight. On the command center screens, Thesara watched this conversation with growing unease. The human captain was proposing something insane, a tiny force attacking a vastly superior enemy. It should not work. It could not work. And yet, Elder Morath appeared at her side. His ancient face was troubled but thoughtful. You've read the files, Thesara said quietly, not looking at him. Yes. And? Morath was silent for a moment. Then he said, the Drenari outnumbered them 50-1. The Vash were richer and more cunning. The Tauren had 6,000 years of military experience. He paused. None of it mattered. The humans won every time. Thesara watched the small human ship on the screen. The Endurance, such a fitting name. It was preparing to move, its crew running to stations, its weapons powering up, one tiny ship against 200. They're either very brave, she murmured, or very foolish. Perhaps, Morath replied. There's something else entirely. On the Endurance, Hana opened a channel to the approaching swarm fleet. Her voice was calm and clear. This is Captain Yun Hana of the Terran vessel Endurance. You are approaching a station under human protection. You have one chance to withdraw. There will be no second warning. For a moment, there was silence. Then the swarm commander's response came. Harsh laughter that echoed across the communication channel. One little ship threatens us? Go home, human. This is not your fight. Hana closed the channel. They've made their choice, she said quietly. She turned to her crew. Every face was set with grim determination. No fear, no hesitation. Just the quiet certainty of people who knew exactly what they were doing. All hands, she announced. Prepare for combat. Today we remind the galaxy what humanity is capable of. The Endurance's engines flared to life, and the small ship began moving toward 200 enemies. Behind her, the Valorian fleet watched in disbelief. The humans were actually attacking. The Endurance hit the swarm fleet like a knife cutting through flesh. Hana had studied pirate tactics for years. She knew how they thought, how they moved, how they expected their victims to behave. The swarm was used to prey that ran or cowered. They were not prepared for a single ship charging directly into their formation. "Target the command cluster," Hana ordered. "Jinwoo, I need precision strikes on their communication arrays first. Blind them." "Targeting now," Jinwoo replied, his voice tight with concentration. His fingers moved across the tactical console with impossible speed. The Endurance's weapons fired, not in the wide spreads that most ships used, but in narrow, precise beams that hit exactly where Jinwoo aimed them. One swarm ship lost its sensors, another lost its communication antenna. A third took a direct hit to its bridge. The enemy fleet scattered in confusion. "They weren't expecting that," the weapons officer reported with grim satisfaction. "Stay focused," Hana said. "This is just the beginning." In the Valorian command center, Thesara watched the battle unfold on the main screen. She had expected the human ship to be destroyed within the first few minutes. Instead, she was watching something she had never seen before. The Endurance moved through the enemy formation like water flowing around stones. It never stayed still, never presented an easy target. Every shot it fired seemed to hit something vital. When the swarm ships tried to surround it, the human vessel somehow slipped away and reappeared behind them. "How are they doing that?" Kelvoran demanded over the communication channel. He was aboard his own ship, the Valorian warship Eternal Blade, watching the same impossible display. Thesara had no answer. "War Prince!" Hana's voice came through the channel, calm despite the chaos around her. "Now would be a good time to join the attack. Target their left flank. They're already off balance." Kelvoran hesitated. Every instinct told him to maintain defensive positions around the station, but the human captain had been right about everything so far. "All ships," he ordered, "attack the enemy left flank. Follow the humans' lead." The Valorian fleet surged forward, 12 ships joining the fight. The swarm commanders had not expected this. They had assumed the defenders would hide behind the station, waiting to be overwhelmed. Instead, they were facing an aggressive counterattack that was already disrupting their formations. "Press the advantage," Hana commanded. "Don't let them reorganize." The battle became a storm of fire and movement. The Endurance led the charge, drawing enemy attention while the Valorian ships struck from the sides. Jinwoo coordinated targeting data with the Valorian tactical officers, sharing information in real time. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed like they might actually win. Then the swarm adapted. The enemy commanders pulled back their scattered ships and reformed into a massive wedge formation. 200 ships became a single spear aimed at the heart of the defending fleet. "They're concentrating their forces," Jinwoo reported. "If they hit us with everything at once." "I know," Hana said quietly. The swarm charged. What followed was brutal. The combined fleet fought with everything they had, but numbers were numbers. For every swarm ship they destroyed, 3 more took its place. The Valorian vessels began taking heavy damage. The Eternal Blade lost its forward shields. 2 smaller Valorian ships were destroyed completely. And the Endurance kept fighting. Hana had taken a hit to her shoulder when a console exploded beside her. Blood soaked through her uniform, but she refused to leave the bridge. "Captain, you need medical attention," her first officer urged. "Later," Hana said through gritted teeth. "We're not done yet." The Endurance had taken dozens of hits. Its shields were failing. Hull breaches had been sealed with emergency bulkheads. A third of its weapons were offline, but it was still fighting. In the Valorian command center, Thesara watched with growing disbelief. The human ship was falling apart around its crew, yet they refused to retreat. They kept firing, kept maneuvering, kept drawing enemy fire away from the damaged Valorian vessels. "Why won't they run?" she whispered. Elder Morath stood beside her, his ancient eyes fixed on the screen. "Because they can't," he said quietly. It's not in their nature. On the bridge of the Endurance, Jinwoo called out another warning. "Captain, we've lost Engine 3. Our speed is dropping. They're going to surround us." Hana looked at her crew. They were exhausted, wounded, terrified, but none of them had stopped working. None of them had suggested retreat. She opened a channel to the entire ship. "All hands, this is the captain. I know you're tired. I know we're hurt, but we are not done. Every minute we fight is another minute for the people on that station. Every shot we fire is another chance for our allies." She paused, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders. "We are the Endurance. We do not stop. We do not break. We hold the line until there is no line left to hold. That is who we are. That is what it means to be human." The response came from every section of the ship. Not words, but actions. Weapons that should have been offline flickered back to life as engineers worked miracles with damaged systems. Wounded crew members returned to their posts. The ship that should have died kept fighting. The swarm commander watched the small human vessel with something like confusion. He had destroyed ships many times larger than this one. They had always surrendered or fled when the damage became too great. But this tiny vessel just kept coming. "What is wrong with them?" he muttered. He ordered his ships to focus all fire on the Endurance, kill the stubborn human ship, and the rest of the defenders would lose heart. The Endurance shuddered under the concentrated assault. More systems failed. More crew members fell. The bridge was filled with smoke and the smell of burning metal. Hana stood at her station, one hand pressed against her wounded shoulder, the other gripping the tactical display. "Jinwoo," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "Can you get me one more shot at their flagship?" Jinwoo looked at his console. Most of it was dark, but one targeting system was still functioning, barely. "I can try," he said. "Then try." He calculated the trajectory, compensating for their damaged sensors and dying engines. It was an impossible shot, the kind of shot that only worked in stories, but Jinwoo was very good at his job. The Endurance fired one last time. The shot crossed the battlefield in a heartbeat and struck the swarm flagship directly in its reactor core. The massive vessel exploded in a ball of fire that was visible from the station. The swarm fleet froze. Their commander was dead, their flagship was gone, and the tiny ship that should have died an hour ago was still floating, still fighting, still refusing to break. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the swarm began to retreat. Not all of them. Some of the more aggressive captains pushed forward, eager to finish the fight. But without their commander's orders, there was no coordination. The retreat became a scramble as pirates fled in all directions. In the Valorian command center, Thesara stared at the screen in silence. They had won. Against impossible odds, with a tiny fleet and a single human ship, they had won. "High Ambassador," a communications officer reported, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Endurance. They've lost propulsion. Life support is failing." Thesara did not hesitate. "Send rescue vessels immediately. Get their crew to safety." She paused, then added quietly, "And tell Captain Yoon that the Valorian Dominion owes her a debt." On the dying bridge of the Endurance, Hana heard the message. She smiled through the pain and the exhaustion. "Told you," she whispered to no one in particular. "We don't stop." Then her eyes closed, and the world went dark. But even unconscious, even wounded, even aboard a ship that was barely holding together, she had not retreated. She had not surrendered. She had held the line. And somewhere in the darkness of space, the swarm commanders were spreading the word, "Do not attack anything the humans are protecting. They do not know how to stop." The celebration was short-lived. Even as Valorian rescue ships rushed to save the Endurance's crew, sensors detected new contacts emerging from hyperspace. The swarm had called for reinforcements, 50 more ships, fresh and undamaged, ready to finish what their fallen commander had started. In the command center of the Throne of Stars, the mood shifted from relief to despair. They had spent everything defeating the first wave. The Valorian fleet was battered, several ships destroyed, the rest running low on ammunition. The Endurance was a drifting wreck, and now 50 more enemies were coming. Thesara stood at the central display, watching the new contacts approach. Her face was calm, but her hands were clasped tightly behind her back. "How long until they reach weapon range?" she asked. 40 minutes, High Ambassador." 40 minutes. Not enough time to repair the damaged ships. Not enough time to evacuate the station. Not enough time for anything. Kelvoran's voice came through the communication channel. His ship, the Eternal Blade, had survived the battle but was badly wounded. "High Ambassador, we should consider evacuation. Save who we can." It was sensible advice. It was the logical choice. A commander should know when a battle was lost. But before Thesara could respond, another voice spoke. "No." Park Dae-sung stepped forward from the shadows of the command center. He had been watching the battle in silence, his expression unreadable. Now he walked to stand beside Thesara at the central display. "What did you say?" Thesara asked. "No evacuation," Dae-sung said calmly. "We hold." Kelvoran's laugh was harsh and bitter. "With what? Your ship is dying. Our fleet is broken. We have nothing left." Dae-sung looked at the display showing the approaching enemy ships. 50 vessels, fresh and eager for blood. "You asked me once," he said quietly, "what I meant when I said humanity has never lost a war we truly committed to." He turned to face Thesara. "Would you like me to show you?" Thesara studied his face. There was no fear there, no desperation, just that same quiet certainty she had seen when he first arrived, the certainty of someone who knew something she did not. "Show me," she said. Dae-sung nodded and activated his personal communicator. "Captain Yoon, are you conscious?" There was a pause. Then Hana's voice came through, weak but alert. She had been stabilized in the medical bay but refused to sleep while the battle continued. "I'm here, Ambassador. The swarm has reinforcements incoming. 50 ships." Another pause. Then Hana laughed softly, a sound that somehow carried both exhaustion and defiance. "Understood. Is the distress beacon still broadcasting?" "It has been since the battle started." "Good." Hana's voice grew stronger. "Then they'll be here soon." Thesara frowned. "Who will be here?" Dae-sung smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him since he arrived. "When a human ship sends a distress signal," he explained, "other humans respond. It doesn't matter how far away they are. It doesn't matter what they were doing. They come, always." "But the nearest human fleet is days away," Thesara protested. "There's no way." "High Ambassador," a sensor officer interrupted. "We're detecting new contacts. Multiple ships exiting hyperspace on the far side of the system." The display updated. 15 new signatures appeared, and they were not swarm vessels. The lead ship was broadcasting identification codes. Terran Navy Carrier Indomitable, Admiral Kwon Tae-hyun commanding. Dae-sung's smile widened slightly. "They were in the area. Routine patrol. When they heard our signal, they came." Thesara stared at the display. 15 human ships had just appeared from nowhere because a single frigate had called for help. They had traveled at maximum speed, probably burning out their engines, risking their own safety, all for one small ship. "You came," she said slowly, "for the Endurance." "We came for our people," Dae-sung corrected gently. "Humans do not abandon each other. Ever." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Kwon Tae-hyun surveyed the battlefield. He was an older man, his hair white but his eyes sharp. He had commanded ships for 30 years, and he had seen many things. But the sight of the Endurance, broken, burning, still somehow intact, filled him with pride. "Status of the Endurance?" he asked. "Hull integrity at 12%, Admiral. Life support failing, but her crew is alive." "Good." Quan turned to his tactical officer. "And the enemy?" 50 swarm ships approaching from the system edge. They'll reach the station in 35 minutes. Then we have 35 minutes to make them regret coming here. Quan opened a channel to the swarm fleet. His voice was cold and hard. "This is Admiral Quan Tae-hyun of the Terran Navy carrier Indomitable. You attacked a station under human protection. You damaged a human vessel and harmed her crew." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Surrender immediately or be destroyed. There will be no second warning." The swarm commanders hesitated. They had come expecting easy prey, a damaged fleet, a wounded station, an easy victory. Instead, they found fresh human warships waiting for them. But they were pirates. Pride and greed were stronger than sense. "You are still outnumbered, human," the lead swarm captain responded. 50 ships against 15. The odds favor us." Quan's expression did not change. "The odds have never mattered to us. But if you need to learn that lesson personally, we're happy to teach you." He closed the channel and turned to his crew. "All ships, attack formation. Target their command vessels first. Show them how humans fight." The Terran battle group surged forward. In the command center, the Sara watched as the human ships engaged the swarm reinforcements. It was not the desperate struggle of the earlier battle. This was something else entirely, a methodical, precise destruction that was almost beautiful in its efficiency. The human ships worked together perfectly, each vessel knowing exactly where the others would be, coordinating their fire without visible communication. When a swarm ship tried to flank them, 3 human vessels were already there, waiting. "How are they doing that?" Kelvoran whispered, his earlier arrogance completely gone. Elder Morath answered, his voice soft. "They train for this, all of them. From the moment they join their military, they prepare for moments like this. Not just their captains and admirals. Every crew member, every pilot, every soldier. They are all ready, always." On the display, the swarm fleet was falling apart. 10 ships destroyed in the first 5 minutes. 20 more crippled or fleeing. The human vessels barely had scratches on their shields. The swarm commanders finally understood what they were facing. This was not a battle. This was an execution. The survivors fled. In less than 20 minutes, the second wave of the hollow swarm had been completely routed. The remaining ships scattered into hyperspace, running in all directions, desperate to escape. Silence fell over the command center. The Sara stood motionless, staring at the display. 50 enemy ships had arrived ready for victory. Now there were none. She turned to Dae-sung. The human diplomat stood calmly beside her, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression peaceful. "You knew," she said. "You knew they were coming." "I hoped," Dae-sung admitted. "The beacon was broadcasting. Humans always respond." "And if they hadn't arrived in time?" Dae-sung met her eyes. "Then we would have fought until we couldn't fight anymore, and then we would have found another way. That is what commitment means, High Ambassador. It means never giving up, no matter how bad things look." He paused, then added quietly, "I told you. Humanity has never lost a war we truly committed to. I wasn't boasting. I was stating a fact." The Sara remembered laughing at him 3 days ago. She remembered thinking he was a fool, a representative of a young species with more confidence than sense. She was not laughing now. "I think," she said slowly, "we need to have another conversation about that alliance." The aftermath of battle was always quieter than the battle itself. Ships drifted in the darkness, some burning, some simply dead. Rescue vessels moved between the wreckage, searching for survivors. Medical teams worked without rest, treating the wounded from both fleets. The Endurance had been towed to the station's repair dock. What remained of her was barely recognizable, a skeleton of twisted metal and shattered systems held together by emergency patches and the determination of her crew. Engineers from both species were already arguing about the best way to save her. Captain Yoon Ha-na lay in the station's medical bay, surrounded by beeping machines and soft white light. Her shoulder had been treated, her broken ribs stabilized, her body filled with enough painkillers to numb a small animal. She was awake anyway. The door to her room slid open, and High Ambassador Thasara entered. The Valorian paused at the threshold, uncertain for perhaps the first time since Dae-sung had met her. "Captain Yoon," she said, "may I come in?" Hana turned her head slightly, wincing at the movement. "Of course, High Ambassador." Thasara walked to the bedside and stood there, looking down at the wounded human. Hana was young by any species standards, barely 30 in human years. And yet she had done something that Valorian warriors with centuries of experience had never accomplished. "I wanted to thank you," Thasara said. "What you did, leading that attack, drawing their fire, staying in the fight when any sensible commander would have retreated. You saved this station. You saved my people." Hana's lips twitched into something like a smile. "I was doing my job." "No." Thasara shook her head. "I have seen many soldiers do their jobs. What you did was something else. You were willing to die. Not because you wanted to, but because you believed it was necessary. We all were," Hana said. "My crew, every single one of them. They knew the risks. They stayed anyway." Why? The question was simple, but Thasara had been trying to answer it since the battle ended. Why would anyone fight like that? Why would anyone refuse to retreat when death was certain? It went against every instinct of survival. Hana was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "When I was young," she said finally, "my grandmother told me a story about a king in our ancient history who faced an invasion. His enemy had 1,000,000 soldiers. He had 300. Everyone told him to run, to save himself, to fight another day. But he didn't run. He took his 300 warriors to a narrow pass and held it for 3 days against impossible odds. They all died. But those 3 days gave his people time to prepare. They survived because he stood." She looked at Thasara. "That's who we are. We're the ones who stand. Not because we're braver than anyone else. Not because we don't feel fear. We feel it, trust me, I was terrified. But fear doesn't change what's right. Fear doesn't change duty. The people on this station needed us. So we stood." Thasara absorbed this in silence. It was such a simple philosophy. And yet it had produced a species that had never lost a war. "I asked Ambassador Park what he meant," she said slowly. "When he said humanity never loses wars you commit to. I think I understand now. It's not about military power or technology. It's about this, about being willing to die for something." "More than willing," Hana corrected gently. "It's about being certain. When we commit to something, truly commit, there is no alternative, no backup plan, no retreat. We win or we die trying. The enemy can kill us, but they can't break us, and eventually that difference matters." Thasara thought about the species in Morath's files. The Drenari, who had outnumbered humanity 50-1. The Vash, who had been richer and more cunning. The Tauren, who had ruled for 6,000 years. All of them had faced human commitment. All of them had broken against it. "You are terrifying people," she said quietly. "I mean that as a compliment." Hana laughed, then winced as her ribs protested. "We try." Outside the medical bay, the station was slowly returning to normal. Debris was being cleared, systems repaired, reports filed. The Valorian crew worked alongside human volunteers, two species united by shared survival. Admiral Kwan walked through the corridors with Park Dae-sung, surveying the damage. "The Endurance is going to need months of repairs," Kwan said. "Maybe more, but she can be saved. Her crew was lucky." "Not lucky," Dae-sung replied. "Skilled. Captain Yoon is one of the finest commanders I've ever met." "She'll make admiral someday," Kwan agreed, "if she doesn't get herself killed being heroic first." They reached an observation deck overlooking the repair dock. Below them, the broken hull of the Endurance was swarming with workers. "The Valorians are different now," Dae-sung observed. "Have you noticed?" Kwan nodded. "They're looking at us differently, less like curiosities and more like, I don't know, equals? Maybe even something more. That's what happens when you bleed beside someone. It changes how they see you." Dae-sung paused, watching the workers below. "Do you know what the Sara said to me after the battle? She said she wanted to renegotiate the alliance, not consider or discuss, renegotiate as equals." 3 days of diplomacy couldn't accomplish that," Kwan said with a slight smile. "One battle did. That's always been our way, hasn't it?" Dae-sung sighed. "We try to talk, we try to reason, but in the end it always comes down to showing them who we are. Words don't convince anyone, actions do." "Is that what you were counting on?" "I wasn't counting on anything." Dae-sung turned away from the window. "But I know our people. I know what we're capable of when we're tested. I believed that if the moment came, we would rise to meet it." He smiled faintly. "I was right." In another part of the station, Lieutenant Baek Jin-woo was surrounded by Valorian officers who wanted to understand how he had made that impossible shot. He tried to explain the mathematics, the calculations, the instincts that had guided him, but they seemed more interested in shaking his hand and slapping his back. "I've never seen targeting like that," one Valorian said. "You must have been training your whole life." Jin-woo shrugged, embarrassed by the attention. "We all train. Every day. Captain Yoon says preparation is the foundation of victory. Your captain is wise. She's the best commander I've ever served under." Jin-woo hesitated, then added, "When I first joined the Endurance, I was angry that we weren't getting a bigger assignment. We were just a single frigate on a diplomatic mission. I thought I was wasting my skills." "And now?" Jin-woo looked at the Valorians around him, former skeptics, who now treated him with genuine respect. "Now I understand. Every assignment matters. Every crew matters. Because you never know when you'll be tested. And when that test comes, you have to be ready. Always ready." He smiled. That's what it means to be human. The Valorians exchanged glances. They had lived for millennia. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had thought themselves masters of the galaxy. But these young humans, these children among the stars, had just taught them something they had never learned in all their long history. Sometimes the smallest force could change everything. Sometimes courage mattered more than numbers. And sometimes the species you dismissed as insignificant would be the ones who saved your life. On the repair dock below, the Endurance hung in her cradle of scaffolding, broken, battered, barely alive, but still there. Still enduring, just like the species that had built her. The negotiation chamber looked different now. 3 days ago, Park Dae-sung had stood in this same room and presented humanity's terms for an alliance. The Valorians had laughed at him. They had dismissed his species as children playing at diplomacy. They had offered nothing but condescension and delay. Now the chamber was full of silent, respectful faces. Thesara sat in her customary place at the head of the Valorian delegation. Beside her, Elder Morath reviewed documents with careful attention. War Prince Kelvoran was present too, but his earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been humility. On the human side, Dae Sung sat with Admiral Kwan and 2 aides. Captain Yoon Ha-na was there as well, despite the medical team's objections. She wore her arm in a sling and moved carefully, but she had insisted on attending. "We saved their station together," she had told the doctors. "I'm going to be there when we finish this." The Sarah rose to address the room. "3 days ago," she began, "I laughed at Ambassador Park. He told me that humanity had never lost a war they truly committed to. I thought he was a young fool from a young species, boasting about victories that meant nothing in the larger galaxy." She paused, her silver eyes sweeping the room. "I was wrong." The words echoed in the silence. "I have watched your people fight," the Sarah continued. "I have seen your captain lead her ship into impossible odds without hesitation. I have seen your crew refuse to retreat when any sensible soldier would have run. I have seen your admiral bring his fleet across the stars to save a single frigate." She turned to face Dae Sung directly. "I understand now what you meant. Humanity does not lose because humanity does not stop. Not ever." Dae Sung inclined his head slightly, but said nothing. Thesara picked up a document from the table. The original human proposal she had dismissed with such amusement. "Full and equal partnership," she read. "Mutual defense, shared technology, equal voting rights in any joint council." She set the document down. "The Valorian Council has reviewed these terms. We accept them. All of them. Without modification." Kelvoran stirred in his seat, but did not object. He had seen too much in the past few days to argue. "Furthermore," Thesara added, "the Council has authorized me to offer something that humanity did not request. A permanent seat on the Dominion's military command structure. Your tactical expertise has proven itself. We would be fools not to learn from it." Admiral Kwan raised an eyebrow at this unexpected addition. "That's generous, High Ambassador." "It is practical," Thesara replied. "The Hollow Swarm will spread word of what happened here. Other powers will learn that the Valorian Dominion now has human allies. Some will be curious. Others will be afraid. Having your people integrated into our command will show everyone that this alliance is real, not just words on a document." Dae Sung smiled slightly. "Then we accept. With gratitude." The formal signing took only a few minutes. Documents were exchanged, seals applied, records updated. What had seemed impossible 3 days ago was now official. The Valorian Dominion and the Terran Alliance were equal partners. But the real moment came after the ceremony, when the delegations mingled freely for the first time. Elder Morath approached Ha-na, who was standing by a window watching the stars. "Captain Yoon," he said, "may I speak with you?" Ha-na turned, wincing slightly at the movement. "Of course, Elder." Morath was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He was ancient by any standard, old enough to remember the Dominion's greatest conquests, old enough to have heard whispers about humanity from dying species long ago. "I read the files," he said finally. "From the Drenari, the Vash, the Tauren. They all said the same thing, that humans simply do not stop, that you cannot be broken." He looked at her with his clouded eyes. "Is it true?" Ha-na considered the question seriously. "We can be killed," she said. "We can be hurt. We can be defeated in battles." She paused. "But broken? No, I don't think so. Not as a species. There's something in us, I don't know what to call it, that just refuses to give up. Even when we lose, we come back. Even when we're destroyed, someone survives to remember and rebuild." "Why?" Ha-na smiled. A tired smile, but a real one. "I think it's because we know how fragile we are. Every human knows they're going to die someday. We're not like you. We don't live for centuries. We get maybe 80 years if we're lucky. So we learn early that time is precious, that everything can be taken away in an instant." She shrugged. Maybe that's why we fight so hard for what matters. We know we don't have forever. Morath absorbed this in silence. It made a strange kind of sense. A species shaped by mortality, driven by the knowledge that nothing lasts. You are wise for someone so young, he said finally. I'm 32, Hana replied. By human standards, I'm not that young. By Valorian standards, you are practically an infant. Hana laughed at that, then clutched her ribs. Please don't make me laugh, Elder. It hurts. Across the room, Thesara was speaking with Dae Sung. I owe you an apology, she said. When you first arrived, I dismissed you. I thought you were beneath our notice. You were not the first to think so, Dae Sung replied calmly. You won't be the last. Does it bother you, being underestimated? Dae Sung considered the question. No, being underestimated has advantages. People reveal their true nature when they think they're dealing with someone weak. And when the moment comes to prove them wrong, he smiled. The impact is greater. Thesara shook her head slowly. You are a dangerous people, Ambassador. Not because of your weapons or your ships, but because of how you think. We're only dangerous to those who threaten us, Dae Sung said. To our friends, we are the most loyal allies you could ask for. Today proved that. Yes, it did. Thesara extended her hand in the human gesture of friendship she had learned from the cultural files. To our alliance, then, may it last longer than either of our civilizations. Dae Sung took her hand. To our alliance. Later that evening, after the ceremonies were complete and the diplomats had retired, Hana found herself alone on the observation deck. The stars stretched out before her, endless and ancient. Jinwoo found her there. Captain, he said, the doctors are looking for you. Something about bed rest and following orders. Hana waved a hand dismissively. They can wait. I wanted to see the stars. Jinwoo stood beside her, looking out at the darkness. Sir, he said quietly, when we charged into that swarm fleet, were you scared? Terrified, Hana admitted. I thought we were all going to die. But you did it anyway. Yes. She turned to look at him. Fear is not the enemy, Lieutenant. Fear is just information. Your body telling you something is dangerous. The question is, what you do with that information. Do you let it control you, or do you control it? And you controlled it. I chose to. Hana looked back at the stars. That's all courage really is. Choosing to act even when you're afraid. Anyone can do it. The trick is remembering that you have a choice. They stood in silence for a while, two humans on a station full of ancient aliens, looking out at the galaxy they were slowly claiming as their own. Captain, Jinwoo said eventually, do you think they'll remember us? The Valorians, I mean. In 1,000 years, when we're all gone, do you think they'll remember what we did here? Hana smiled. They'll remember. The Draenari remembered us until they were gone. The Vash remembered. The Tauren remembered. She paused. That's the thing about humans, Lieutenant. We make an impression. We might not live as long as other species, but the things we do, those last. She reached out and put a hand on his shoulder. Today, we showed them who we are. We showed them that humanity doesn't give up, doesn't back down, doesn't abandon its friends. That's worth more than all the treaties and documents in the galaxy. She smiled. Now come on. Let's go get yelled at by the medical team together. They walked away from the observation deck, leaving the stars behind. Somewhere in the repair dock, the Endurance waited patiently for the work that would make her whole again. And somewhere in the galaxy, word was spreading. Humanity had arrived. They were young, they were small, they were fragile, and they were absolutely, completely unstoppable.